Hello. Cheers. Skål. Slanjava. Bottoms up. Welcome to the Mermaid Tavern. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. So, come into my world here. Come into my world. Come into my world. Paul McCartney has been, since the end of his brilliant tour, end of last year, he's been touring around parts of England with Nancy. And he's in the southwest of England, where I am here. And he's been going on a bit of a nostalgia trip, you know. You're never too old for a bit of nostalgia, are you? Are you never too young? And he's been to Bournemouth, which is not far from me, which, as you'll know, if you're a Beatles brain, the Beatles played more in Bournemouth after London and Liverpool. After Liverpool and London, the Beatles played more in Bournemouth than any other towns. And he passes through Dorchester. Maybe remembers that this is the way they went in 1963 on the route to Plymouth. He sees the sign to Weymouth. He thinks, "Oh no, I've never been to Weymouth, where the Mermaid Tavern is. I've never been to Weymouth, so why don't we go and see what Weymouth's like? It's a quiet time of year." So they drive down the 5 or 6 miles to the coast, to the sea, park up at the Melcombe Regis car park, and wander around. So Nancy goes off doing her own thing. Paul says, "I'll take a wander around and meet you." So he wanders down this side street, just quite close to the seafront here, and he comes upon the Mermaid Tavern. Now, this is a dream, but even in dreams, you've got to be, you've got to have some sense of perspective. So it's not just because he's heard about the Mermaid Tavern, I mean, I don't flatter myself. Even I've just got just a little bit less than 300 subscribers to this channel. So I'm grateful for every one of you who does subscribe, but it's not because he's heard about me, Even in dreams, you've got to be, a bit realistic. But my kind of, I have some pretty wild dreams. So he wanders into the Mermaid Tavern here. What would you say? What would you say? Paul McCartney wanders into, not just into a pub. Well, if you're sitting in a pub, in a situation where you're one-to-one with him, what would you say? What would you say? Well, I'd like to think I'd keep my cool. It'd be difficult because we've not only got one of the most instantly recognizable, one of the most famous, a living legend. I'd go so far as to say, that word legend is bandied around, but Paul McCartney, I think everyone will agree, is a living legend. What it must be like to be a living legend. I wouldn't ask him that. So, little short of a, come on, let's be honest about it, musical god. That's not an exaggeration, What would you say to him? Well, I'd kind of want to be, cool. I wouldn't want to make him feel, Beatleys Tone did a great couple of videos a couple of years ago about times, 3 times or so, I think it was, or that he met Paul McCartney, once by chance and the other signings. And he said something which kind of resonated with me, that you shouldn't be so in awe of him to make him feel uncomfortable, And I've always been like that with, I've seen some famous people around. I have to say, I've never been anywhere close to Paul McCartney, apart from seeing him, being quite close to him in 2010. I had some good seats at the O2 in London when I saw him in 2010, that Good Evening London tour. And then, pretty good seats when I saw him in Manchester too, so I could see his face, But I've never been in the same room with him. I've never seen him on the street. I've seen some quite famous people around, and I've never wanted to bother them, I've never wanted to bother them. What would I say? It's nice to see you in Weymouth. Can I get you a drink? So, and I'd get him a drink. I say, can I recommend something to you? I don't know if you're in the mood for a beer. And I wouldn't take it as read that he was, because a lot of people, of course, are doing, aren't they, as is fashionable, dry January. So you might just want an orange juice. But I'd hope he'd have a beer. And I'd say to him, can I recommend a beer that there's a new beer that's just come on here at the Mermaid Tavern. And it's from where I'm from, Manchester. And it's my favourite beer. And if you like a sort of citrusy thing, I wouldn't say this, but I know you may know this. I only read this late last year that he likes a margarita, doesn't he? Once he's come off stage, or a macarita. But so I wouldn't say that. But knowing that he likes the sort of citrusy things, I say this is a very citrusy beer. It's called Earl Grey IPA, and you might like it. Sort of, if you like, do you like an Earl Grey tea? I'd say, twist of bergamot oranges. Well, you get this from this beer. It's really lovely. And I recommend just try a taster. Try a taster. And of course, he'd love it, wouldn't he? So I poured him a pint. We don't do things by halves here at the Mermaid Tavern. Earl Grey IPA. This is it. It's gorgeous. Cheers, Paul. Would I call him Paul? I wouldn't call him Mr. McCartney. I might just say cheers. I always feel a bit forward. Maybe it's because I'm quite old-fashioned about calling people their Christian name if you don't really know them, I remember I met Billy J. Kramer last year. A friend knew him, and I met him, and I just said, "Hello, Billy." And afterwards, I thought he was nice about it, but I just thought that's a bit forward, But I'm sure they're used to it, aren't they? People coming, if you're in the public eye like that, if you're famous anyway, people come up to them and they feel they can just call you by their first name. But I'd feel a bit awkward about it. Now, I'd take it as read that you hadn't just come in here just to sit in a quiet corner. This is a bit of a what you might call a micro pub. Very fashionable now, isn't it? And once we talked about the beer, I say, well, yeah, I'm from. This is from Marble Brewery, which is in Manchester. And of course, I'd have to say, I saw you in Manchester, and it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And if I could pick a highlight and one of an evening of highlights, I'd just say, to see you do now and then was just a bit special. And congratulations on finishing that song. It was just amazing what you did with it, and the way you stuck to it. And I'd say I'd also loved In Spite of All the Danger, where you had all the band sort of came to the front of the stage, and like a little ensemble, it was kind of reminiscent of the Quarrymen a bit. I said those were the two highlights for me of the evening, but I'd say it was just a wonderful, wonderful show, and I loved it. All this time, while I've been pouring him a pint, he's been checking out. I've got a little display here to my dad, who was in the RAF in World War II. I've got a little model plane, a couple of model planes that he flew in, and pictures of him in the RAF when he was in Coastal Command, and later on the war when he was in Burma. And Paul will be looking at it and said, "Oh," I'd say, "That's my dad." Like you, he was born in Walton Hospital. So about 22 years before you, he was born in Walton Hospital. Now, I'd have to be a bit careful here, wouldn't I? Because, funny little story, my friend Alan met him at a signing in London, a long time ago. I think it was a DVD, one of those concert DVDs, was it, Alan? And he was getting him to sign it. He'd queued up for a long time, And, as you do, you want to say something. And Alan had thought, we've got a connection to it here. Now, I can't remember, Alan, is it a mate of yours, or is it a family member of yours? Anyway, what he said was, my mate, or whatever, had built a jetty for you on the farm up in Campbelltown. And he said that Paul, who just finished signing his name, went, "It's a small world." So, would he say the same here to me, saying that my dad was born at Walton Hospital like he was, 22 years before him? Think of all the babies that have been born, millions of babies that were born before Paul was born there, and then after. So, might run the risk of Paul doing a bit of "it's a small world." But what I'd do is I'd come in quick and say, his parents were living in Aintree at that time, and I'd say, "What's your take on what the Aintree Iron is?" And he'd say, "Well," you might say, "you'd have to ask my brother," as in Mike, of course, as you know, the scaffold. "Thank you very much for the Aintree Iron. Thank you very much." Bit of a debate as to what the Aintree Iron is. There's quite a few different interpretations as to what that is if you look into it. So I just get that in. I want to tell them about my mum came from Hoylake, which is the Wirral Peninsula, And after after World War II, Dad's family moved from Liverpool over to Wallasey. He knows that area. I mean, I think as a baby, even you wouldn't remember it, but as a baby, he spent some time in Wallasey, in a very short time, I think it was. And I'd say, does your brother still live in Heswall? Because I know Mike did live there once. I'm not even sure if he does live there anymore now. And of course, that's where their dad Jim came to live in Heswall. So yeah, I'd want to get that in about my family. It'd be important. Now, I wouldn't want to do all the talking here. You know, it's taken as read that I'm letting him get a word in edgeways. You know, I wouldn't want to ask him any inane questions. I wouldn't want to go like, oh, either I love you, Paul, or go all gooey-eyed and go sickly smile on my face. All they can, you know, just try and keep it cool. Keep it cool. Keep it cool. You know, don't be too in awe. Don't be too in awe. Make him feel comfortable. You know, I'd tell him things that come to the forefront. One of the forefront things was I played Mal Evans, the roadie Mal Evans, his old mate Mal Evans. I played him in a play back in 2012, 2013, and I say I played your old mate, and I was always fascinated by the time that you moved in. That the Mal moved in with you in early '67, I think it was, as effectively your housekeeper. You lived together for a period. I think it was 5 or 6 months. And do you want to see something funny? I'd say, do you want to see something funny? And on the telly here in the Mermaid Tavern, I just quickly put it on. It's on YouTube. Show them a clip of me playing Mal. And would I dare to do that? I'd want to do it, I think, because it's funny. It's funny. It's not, you know. And if nothing else, you might find it funny because I have Mal doing an impression of him as Paul, and talking about the dog Martha, who, if you know anything about Martha being a bit dirty, and also I'd sort of seen them as a sort of odd couple, like Oscar and Felix out of The Odd Couple, or one of my favourite films, The Odd Couple, with Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. And I said, I'd have to be careful I'd phrase this. I'd say, I sort of saw Mal, because he was the housekeeper, as a sort of fussy, Felix, house pride, fussy Felix, and yourself, no offence, but I'd see you as a sort of more of the Walter Matthau character. That's all I'd say. I wouldn't say, because Walter Matthau as Oscar is definitely the scruffy and the slovenly one, I wouldn't mention Martha, though it's on the YouTube video, the clip. I only show him a clip of it. I wouldn't show it. It goes on for about 2 or 3 minutes or more than that. I can't even remember now. And I just kind of, it would be nice to have his take on it, because in the video I sort of allude to the fact that Mal helped him write lyrics for Fixing a Hole, and I'd seen at the time the scenario. There was a hole in the ceiling there, and needs fixing in the music room, and there's no evidence for that at all that I could find. I just imagined it, but I've noticed Ken Womack has put it in his book. So have you found evidence of that, Ken? Because I just imagined it, that everything Paul was saying, like, oh, I'm taking the time, there's a lot of things I need to do, basically unintentionally feeding everything Mal's saying is feeding Paul the lyrics for the song Fixing a Hole. I don't know if that's true. We do know from the diary that Mal did help Paul with that song, and maybe even the name Sergeant Pepper. Anyway, that's a different story. One thing I don't want to do is piss him off. I'd be mortified if I pissed off Paul McCartney. Can you imagine it? Anyway, also, I'd go on to say that I really love. I love all your songs. I've always been fascinated by the ones that you and John gave away to other artists in the 1960s, like Peter and Gordon. They wrote. Paul wrote 4 songs for Peter and Gordon, most famous of which was "World Without Love." He's locked me away, and only that one. And Woman. Oh, Woman's great. I'd say it's really lovely that both you and John wrote really beautiful songs called Woman. And what you say to that? Woman's one of my favourite John Lennon songs. I really love it. And I love that one. Out of the 4 that you wrote for Peter and Gordon, I think Woman is my favourite. Even though World Without Love is pretty good. So I'd say to him, I'd love to hear, do you have demos of those songs that you wrote for Peter and Gordon and other? Do you have your own, of you just singing it? It's like, they did that, didn't they? There were like guide demos, and we know that there's some demos that have found their way out. There's one of John singing "Bad to Me," which was for Billy J. Kramer, wasn't it? And I think, kind of want to know, because I wouldn't say this to him, but I've always been interested in that, and I think it'd make a great Beatles album, having those songs that they gave away. But if you could find actual, copies of now, he'd be drinking up like I am, and hopefully he's enjoying it. I'm not making him feel uncomfortable. I'm making him feel uncomfortable here, Paul. No, I wouldn't say that to him, of course. But I'd be very much aware of the fact that he's probably not going to even finish his pint, and I'd hopefully be saying, "Oh, this is nice, that, yeah." Mm. What I would do is ask him, "Can I have a picture, just to prove you've been? Can we get a selfie, a picture here with me in the Mermaid Tavern, just to prove you've been here?" I'd say, it's like sometimes I feel like Billy Liar, and I'd say, actually, that's what I'd say to him. I'd say, Billy Liar is one of my favourite films of the 1960s, and my favourite films of all time. I said, "Did you see it?" And I felt a bit like Billy in that, it was wild imagination, imagining, even when in my dreams, ironic, I'd be thinking about the fact that I was dreaming this. And I say, "We've seen Billy Liar." I say, "I love films of the 1960s, and Family Way was a great movie. And your soundtrack was brilliant." And I say, "Do you consider yourself the first solo Beatle? Because that soundtrack album came out in late 1966, probably early 1967. Do you consider yourself the first solo Beatle because of that?" I wonder what he'd say. A lot of people say that George Martin, of course, heavily did the orchestrations on it. So, but it's billed to Paul McCartney, so it technically is the first Beatles solo album. And I'd be very interested to hear what he said to that. Anyway, and I say, "Can I ask you a big favour? There's a guitar I've got over here by the door, and it's been collecting dust, and I can just about play 3 chords. I can play 3 chords right, but not necessarily in the right order, to paraphrase Morecambe and Wise." And Paul, could you? And Paul, it'd be difficult it's even more difficult for him to play this, isn't it? But Paul would do it. I'm sure. Would he do it? It's not in tune. It's dusty. He might just go, da-da-da-da-da. And I say, when he's doing that, my favourite of your songs is "P.S. I Love You." I love that song. I love your songs, but that one especially for me has always resonated since I was very young when I heard it. And in my dreams, he'd give me a couple of chords of it. Oh, that would be so wonderful. And I'd say to him, it makes me so happy that this guitar, this poor neglected guitar, has been played properly for the first time ever, and by you. That would be a special moment. And he'd excuse himself and say, "Oh, I'm meeting up with Nancy at 3 o'clock at the King statue," who all this while has been checking out the charity shops on the high street. I'd say, I'd want to say, like, it's been one of the most thrills of my whole life, meeting you, the most special thing that's ever happened to me. I'd want to say that, but I'd settle just on "bless you." Bless you too for listening to me. I hope you found this interesting. There's an idea I had a while ago. It was partly a dream, actually, and it was also partly seeing. I saw quite a long time ago now, Beatly Tone had done this, as I say, this video about meeting Paul. A couple of and check it out. Really good. If I can remember, I'll put a link in the description, or you might already follow Beatly Tone. He's great. He's one of my favourite. One of my favourite people here on YouTube who talks about the Beatles. And so thank you for that. Beatly Tone, yay! Come in here for a drink at the Mermaid Tavern yourself, anytime with your good lady. Bless you too. Thank you very much for taking the time. And will I see you again? I sincerely hope so.